Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest Netacea webinar. This is part of our Retail Under Attack series, and we're going to look at how sophisticated AI bots are automating cyber fraud. I'm James Middleton, I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Netacea, and I ran the previous webinar with our colleagues from the Threat Intelligence team. Today I'm joined by Andy Ash, who's our CISO. Andy, do you just want to give a little intro to yourself?
Yeah, thanks, James. I'm Andy Ash, and as you say, I'm the CISO here. I've been with Netacea since the very beginning, working with our customers to stop automated fraud. So, yeah, delighted to be here.
Good to have you on board, and I know you're straight off the plane from RSA conference that was in San Francisco last week. So maybe later on we can get some insights, because we did have some news that went out after there. But first of all, so this webinar today is part of our Retail Under Attack series. For those of you who joined the previous webinar, this slide will be familiar to you. We are looking at business logic attacks, and in the previous webinar we looked at business logic attacks in the sense of attacks that take place in post-payment fraud and refund fraud, and we had some colleagues from the Threat Intelligence Center who really helped us understand the kind of attacks and techniques and tactics that we're seeing from fraudsters in the kind of offline world. But today, we're very much going to focus on the digital user journey and business logic attacks that we see taking place there, which commonly occur on web estates, on your websites, your retail applications. If you draw a line right down the middle of this screen here, you'll see the two example attacks on the left, account takeover and scalping, are very much in the digital domain, and then brand impersonation and refund fraud are very much in the offline domain, the soft layer, which I talk about. But just to remind you, business logic attacks are different from traditional cyber attacks, because this is where the attacker is understanding how the business processes, the logic of your website works, and manipulating that logic to deliver a positive outcome for the attacker. And for all intents and purposes, the traffic, the visitor activity that's taking place may look or behave very typically and look very normal. So bot attacks and bots themselves, they kind of exist on a spectrum. And this is just an arbitrary chart I drew up because I needed a mechanic for demonstrating this. But when you say to people, do you understand what a bot attack is? Many people will immediately jump to denial of service, a DDoS attack on the far left here. Now, these kind of attacks are big, dumb, noisy, very obvious attacks where the army of bots, their intention is to consume resources available until there are no more resources left, and your web application or your website or your API is effectively taken down. Often they're used as a smokescreen for other kind of attacks that will take place behind the scenes. Moving forward, we've got enumeration attacks. These are also kind of another sort of brute force attack, typically seen in credential stuffing or account takeover. The bots here will run through lists of usernames and passwords in order to try and break in so the account can be stolen. We might also see credit card attacks where bots will run through stolen credit card information, looking for cards that are still active, still working, maybe don't have any better security attached to them, and then they can use those valid cards to go and commit fraud elsewhere. Now we're getting into the territory of scraper attacks. These are quite interesting because scraper bots, they can be very obvious, and we do see them consuming lots of resources on websites. They crawl all of the available paths. They come back time and time again, and they are becoming increasingly problematic now for businesses running websites because they are consuming resources. But some of the sneakier ones are beginning to modify their behavior to appear more like regular visitors, and they're harder to detect. So this deep blue square here is where we're seeing more sophisticated types of attacks. So scalpers and other kind of data extraction attackers. And these bots are being programmed by fairly knowledgeable criminals to behave just like your human visitors. That makes them harder to detect. Over on the far right, and we'll get into this a little bit later, this is kind of getting into hypothetical territory now, where maybe in the future we're going to be seeing self-learning, fully autonomous bots that are able to evolve dynamically. At the moment, we don't have any kind of Skynets or Matrix bots out there. Every kind of bot attack does require human intervention at the moment, but perhaps in the future that won't be true anymore. At Netacea, we use this phrase sophisticated attack quite a lot. And I just want to define what a sophisticated attack is. In fact, we have a great example on the Netacea website written by Andy Ash here, which I will drop a link into a follow-up email after the webinar today. But the definition of a sophisticated attack in our lexicon is it's targeted. So the attacker is going after a specific company or a specific item, a specific data set, specific product, something of value. And to do that, they're tailoring their tool set. They're using appropriate tools to go after that target. They're tailoring techniques to fit that target. So everything is done in a very bespoke fashion. And these attacks are also incredibly complex. And complexity means that they're able to change multiple dimensions. So it's not just rotating through IP addresses, which can be quite obvious and easy to stop, but they're changing other dimensions as well. And they're also using things like bypass techniques. So to get past your known defensive solutions that they've been able to identify when they're doing their reconnaissance. So it's important to understand that, because historically, and to some degrees today, the bot protection landscape looks like this, and it's kind of focused on distinguishing bots from humans rather than on understanding the intent of each of the visitors coming to your web estate. So this is a very typical kind of step journey that we see the people, the prospects and the customers we talk to, very typical journey we see them take. So over on the far left, they've perhaps deployed some custom or manual in-house tooling of their own in order to try and solve their bot problem as they're seeing these automated attackers come to their websites. Now, that's quite tough to maintain. You need specialist knowledge and skill sets, and not everybody has that, so it becomes quite expensive. Then lots of retailers will deploy a CDN or a WAF, and I'm sure many of our viewers today already have these set up on their websites because they're useful for stopping those DDoS attacks. But these tend to be quite static security applications. They're very rules-based, and what you find is you end up writing rules to catch yesterday's bots, and tomorrow's bots have already moved, and they now have an attack methodology that you can't detect. So you're going through this process of always responding to yesterday's attacks. Then you're moving into the realm of sort of specialist bot protection. And this is where bot protection solutions are looking at the behavioral traits of these visitors, and they're now trying to distinguish which visitors are bots and which visitors are humans, and then pay closer attention to the identified bots. But Netacea's belief is that we should actually be looking at the intent of each visitor. And I'll go into this in a moment, but rather than looking just at behavior, if you look at visitor intent, then that gives you a better understanding, both in terms of being able to respond reactively, but also predictively, in terms of being able to get ahead of attacks and meet them before they've even fully executed. So looking at intent kind of changed the way that cyber professionals think about bot attacks, because an attack actually looks like this. It's not just that deep blue box there. That's the attack execution phase. And when you think about the phrase, we're under attack, that's when the bots are all on your website, they're attacking your web estate, and you see the typical graph of the spikes and the drops where the waves of the attack are taking place and being mitigated. Now, there are several phases, both preceding and after that attack execution, where you can actually extract a lot of insight and use that insight to influence how you build your defensive capabilities against future and current bot attacks. So all the way out on the left here, we've got the point at which the attackers build their team. So they're pulling their team together. They're working out who their targets are, what kind of a gang they're going to be. Are they going to be like a ticket scalping gang? Or are they going to be an account takeover gang? Or are they going to be scalping sneakers? All of those decisions then influence the kind of tools and tactics and techniques that they will then use in their attack. So once we move on to the reconnaissance phase, this is where your attackers are now analyzing their target websites, understanding how that business logic works, and working out where they can manipulate that business logic to give them that positive outcome. This is also the point where they start detecting what existing security solutions are in place, and then they figure out how they're going to get around those security solutions. So are they going to go on the dark and deep web and just buy an off-the-shelf bypass from an anti-bot operator, or are they going to go and build their own? This is the point they start configuring their army of bots and giving those bots their purpose, their instruction, their intent. And then it's only at this point now when the attack is started, executed, and the bots are on your website. For those successful bots that do break through your defenses and achieve their aim, then this is where the theft takes place, and they steal that data. They grab all those high demand items that they were only supposed to get one of. Instead, they get 10 of, or something like that. And then finally, you have the profit phase, where the attacker monetizes their ill-gotten gains and profits from the attack. Now, even after a successful attack has taken place, there's still information there that we can extract to understand more about future attacks we're likely to see from these same adversaries. So we even created our own attack framework to articulate what I've just spoken about, and that's the Blade Business Logic Attack Definition Framework. I did mention this in the previous webinar, but as I said, Andy was in San Francisco RSA last week, and we did have some exciting news. So Andy, can you just tell us A, what the Blade framework is, and B, what was the news that we announced last week?
Yeah, thanks, James. So the Business Logic Attack Definition Framework is an open source knowledge base created to help cybersecurity professionals identify the phases, tactics, and techniques used by adversaries to exploit weaknesses in the business logic of web-facing systems. Now, that's easy because that's on our website or on the Blade website, and we can read that. I think what's more important or more interesting is why we decided to create the Blade framework. There are lots of attack frameworks out there. So Lockheed Martin, Kill Chains, the MITRE ATT&CK, OWASP Top 10, but none of those describe the types of attacks that we're talking about today and that our customers are experiencing. Essentially, those former frameworks like MITRE focus on traditional security, so cross-site scripting, SQL injection, all that kind of good stuff. So we decided to create a framework that covered this area. We immediately open sourced that, and that's been open source for 5 years. But the really exciting part for me, and one of the announcements we made at RSA this year, is that we've donated this framework now to OWASP, and it's been accepted as an official OWASP project. So the OWASP Blade framework is now called, is fully live. I'm sure James will be linking out to the sites and where you can find that. So yeah, that's the big announcement.
Thanks. Yeah, exciting stuff for sure. And indeed, in the follow-up emails that go out after this webinar, whether you've watched the live version today or whether you're watching this on demand, I will give you all of the relevant information about the OWASP Blade framework. But I think one of the interesting things about how these frameworks are being used is that the intelligence that we're able to generate from the application of these frameworks is being used to as part of a fraud intelligence methodology to help enterprises in the retail space fight fraudsters. Can you just give us a little bit of an overview of what you're seeing as a CISO, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. So fraud intelligence helps cyber professionals to understand the TTPs and create rules and policies to better prevent fraud. What we're seeing in the market at the moment is, really forward-thinking companies kind of breaking down the silos between cyber and fraud to get a better cross-functional understanding of fraud, and moving from being a lagging indicator to something that can be detected closer to real time. If you think about the perfect response to any cyber attack, you want to know that it's going to happen. You want to see your adversaries acting in near real time, preparing the attack, and then you want to be able to prevent that. And then finally, you want to know that they've been unsuccessful. And putting these two kind of teams or competencies together gives a much broader overview of this landscape. So, yeah.
Thanks. So, as Andy said, the purpose here of fraud intelligence is trying to move fraud itself from being a lagging indicator of a problem to something that can be detected in real time. And also to reiterate, we are seeing some really forward-thinking companies here, like merging their fraud and their cyber teams to get better communication going on between those departments to try and understand the challenges they're facing. And in the previous webinar, when I said we spoke a lot about threat intelligence, that was a lot of that is about intelligence that you can gather in order to understand your threat universe and find out about attacks before they happen. And the thing that needs to be true of that kind of intelligence is it needs to be actionable, right? You need to be able to use that intelligence effectively in order to build a better defense. But no matter how good your kind of knowledge of a forthcoming attack is when you're dealing with bots and automated attacks, you still always have to be able to respond on day zero, because when the attack takes place, these sophisticated bots and these sophisticated attacks we're talking about, they are able to retool dynamically in near real time and change their TTPs. And you absolutely have to have some kind of software solution in place that is able to respond to those dynamic evolutions. So in the Netacea world, we use something called intent analytics, which looks at the visitors coming to your website and looks at them in terms of what do we understand about each unique visitor? And we build a profile about each of these unique visitors based on a number of different intelligence points. And that helps us ask the question, have we seen this visitor before? Do we understand if this is already a bot? If not, let's keep analyzing it. So then we look at how that visitor is interacting with the system, with the server that they're visiting. So something that's a little bit of a differentiator to many of our other peers in this space, we don't use any kind of client-side or agent-based technology. Everything is based on the analysis of how that visitor is interacting with the server. And we start expanding this profile now and extrapolating on the various data points. And looking at how that visitor is reacting and interacting compared to all of the other visitors present on the site, and all of the other visitors that we're able to detect on other companies' websites in our entire network of customers. So one of the things you have to be aware of here that's fairly interesting and fairly useful from Netacea's perspective is that because Netacea is able to see the activity of all of the visitors on your website at any one time, we can identify patterns of how typical visitors are behaving and how atypical visitors are behaving. Now, if you think about your bot operator, they're only able to see how their own bots are behaving, and they effectively have to guess what a typical visitor or a customer to that website is doing. And this is often where we can find those telltale signs and look for these patterns. Now, remember, like the purpose of having a bot army or launching bot attacks is scale, right? No one sends a single bot out to perform an attack. You send hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of the things. And what happens here is that in this kind of scale of capability we see from the adversaries and the attackers, some of them will just use the same configuration for all of the bots, and what you will suddenly see is like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of identical visitors appearing on your web estate at a single moment in time, which obviously looks suspicious because every visitor should be unique, right? But just to give you some insights into the kind of signals that we look at when we're building our detection models, we're looking at things like anomalies in the length of time spent on site. We're looking at anomalies in the construction of HTTP requests, or in abnormal patterns in the format of headers. I'll go into this in a bit more detail in a moment. We're looking at an abnormal proportion of requests to a specific set of paths. So if you think about when I spoke about scraper bots earlier, then they tend to look at every single path available to them. But your typical visitors probably only follow the same handful of paths all the time. You know, they might just be trying to log in. They might just be browsing some products and adding those products to their shopping cart. So if you detect unusual patterns here, then it's often a sign that something needs looking into deeper. Sometimes we'll see clients rotating cookies, which is unusual behavior. Sometimes we'll see consistent failure to load content on a page. Like, is the visitor moving too quickly through your website? A human needs to download the entire page, process it, and then understand what they need to do next. If bots already know the path they're going to follow, then they won't be loading all of that content. Something I'll touch upon in a minute is an abnormal volume of requests versus typical visitors. And then finally, we have things like the reputational information about IP addresses, because we may already have seen this IP address exhibit some malicious behavior before. And then there's also things like unusual locations for source traffic. So if you have a website that retails to a specific market, such as the UK or the US, and you suddenly start seeing a high proportion of traffic coming from India or Russia or China, and that's not one of your markets, then again, that could be suspicious activity that requires some looking into. Now, we like to give you some insights into what we're talking about when we look at those attack signals and how we use them. So I've got three examples here. I've got one unsophisticated attack I'm going to run through, and then I've got two sophisticated attacks where I'm going to show you where the adversaries got a little bit more sneaky and gave us a little bit more to think about. So this here, this was a streaming and digital content company that we protect. This chart covers about 14 hours, I think. And the attacks here were mostly or all related to a login path. So this looked to be an account takeover type attack. So as you can see here, it's very spiky. It doesn't look very seasonal. There isn't any obvious pattern here. So to our data analysts, that already seems a bit suspicious. They love looking at this kind of stuff. They can look at a chart like this and immediately know when something's off. But what's interesting is when the traffic here suddenly gets very spiky, this is a high number of requests without much change in the source of those requests. So actually what we're seeing here is a single data center and all of the clients from that data center only swapping between 3 user agents. So this immediately seems somewhat suspicious. Now, the thing that was a real giveaway here is, it's quite difficult to see, but that donut chart shows you that 99.92% of visitors to this website typically only make between 1 and 50 requests. When suddenly all of these clients that we see in the spiky traffic here were making hundreds of requests within a few minutes. So that is an obvious giveaway that the adversary here had kind of programmed their bots in a way that made it fairly obvious to us that this was some kind of malicious activity. So moving on to this example here of a sophisticated attack. I'm sorry, my builds are a bit weird with things loading in at different times. This was a footwear retailer, and I think this is a 3-hour window during they call it a drop, when some new high demand, like low volume shoe comes onto the market, that, you know, for the sneakerheads. So this would be a scalping attack. So here we've got shoe scalpers, sneaker scalpers trying to grab all of that inventory for themselves so they can go and resell it on the grey market at a markup. Now, this one was pretty sneaky because the bots in this attack used a legitimate user agent. So in this case, I think it was a Mozilla agent running on a Windows machine. So that means that we look at that user agent and we think, yeah, this could be an actual human visitor because it seems fairly typical. And the attack was rotated through a large number of IPs. So on the chart on the right, the yellow graph is the volume of IPs, which go into the hundreds of thousands. And then the little red blip is also multiple data centers were the source of this activity. So again, that also, when you've got a drop going on, that seems like something you would expect, like suddenly you'd get like a spike in traffic. So to us in the bot protection space, this is what's known as a highly distributed attack. And there's some numbers in that chart there, which shows on a typical day, this website would expect to see nearly 9,000 distinct IPs coming from over 400 distinct data centers. During this particular attack phase, there were 215,000 distinct IPs nearly coming from nearly 9,000 distinct data centers. Again, very, very well distributed. But this was the really, really sneaky thing that we saw. In the example I gave you previously, the giveaway was the average number of requests coming from each client. The programmer of this bot attack matched up very well the number of requests coming from each client, in this case, 10.85 requests. And on a typical day, we would expect to see less than 10 requests. So that was a pretty good match. This adversary really did know what they were doing. Now, we managed to shut down the attack, as you can see from the chart. I'm not going to go into the details of the dimensions or the complex pattern matching that we did succeed on, because that, might give away too much of our secret sauce to any of the bot community watching. But if you do want to talk to us privately, we will go into that and give you a bit more of a detailed explanation of what we did look for and what we did find. This one here is another example of a sophisticated attack. This was a different fashion retailer for clothing. And again, this was a scalper attack. Now, this was interesting because we actually had a heads up about this attack because of the chatter on some forums that we were plugged into. So from our previous webinar, I explained that our threat intelligence team manages to infiltrate some of these fraudster communities, and then we're able to find out sometimes about attacks ahead of time. So this window of time is for 60 minutes. The attack was over and done in less than 60 minutes. And as I said, we had a heads up about this. So we detected what was interesting here. I just wanted to give you some numbers to show you the volumes that you might typically deal with if you're a retailer. We detected in real time that almost half of all traffic hitting this website while there was this event going on for a fashion retailer was malicious, like 4.2 million requests. So that just goes to show that sometimes when you've got like a high traffic event, you have a significant amount of malicious bot activity embedded within that traffic. This was another highly distributed attack. And I think in this case, about 20% of malicious traffic attempted to bypass the capture that we served up to try and make some of those visitors prove themselves. I'm going to talk about capture bypass a bit more in a minute. But I think the most useful, interesting, exciting bit of feedback we got here was while our detection and mitigation attempts were going on in real time, our threat intelligence researchers were watching the frustration mount in the fraudster forums also in real time as they realized that their attack was being derailed by us. And that's some of the best feedback we can get. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to show you a screen grab of that because sometimes we don't want to reveal that we are actually infiltrating these forums, lest we get discovered and kicked out. So on that last example, I ran through a couple of different sophisticated attack techniques, one of which was bypassing of capture. But there are 3 attack techniques that I'm just going to get Andy to talk through here that we commonly see. And this is what's, making life a little bit harder for us in the sort of anti-bot world. But, we're still able to detect and respond to these things. But this is more of a bit of an educational segment, just to give you some insights into the kind of attack techniques that we're seeing. So, Andy, do you just want to sort of give us the lowdown on what a residential proxy is?
Yeah, of course. So residential proxies are botnets that are made up of compromised devices on in people's homes, for example. So that may be the actual router itself, but more likely a device that's sitting behind that router that has been compromised and added to a botnet. That's one type of residential proxy. There are other similar residential proxies where users of mobile apps can opt in to remove adverts without paying for certain apps. And basically, they then give up a little bit of their bandwidth at a certain time of a day, and actually their mobile device will be being used to attack websites as part of a larger botnet. When we think about residential proxies, they're one of the harder ones to detect, because an attack from a residential proxy is one of 2 things. It's either a real person trying to buy a new pair of trainers or sneakers, or it's the most complicated attack because the attacker has gone to the extent of, and they actually cost a lot more than the normal proxies to try and hide their traffic amongst what you would normally class as normal traffic. I think the challenge for retailers and the challenge for bot management is where do you block, and that's why when we talk about intent, we're not looking at the source of the traffic as the single signal that we would use to block. We are looking at the intent of that visitor in the broader pattern of what's happening on the website. That allows us to reduce false positives and increase our blocking rate.
Yep, that's right. And I did mention in the last example that a fair amount of traffic that we saw was trying to bypass capture. Attackers are coming up with some novel ways of trying to bypass capture these days. Capture farms is one of the models we're seeing. What's a capture farm?
Okay, so a capture farm is, it was a human endeavor where lots of people would sit down together as part of an organization, and any capture that was presented to a bot would be forwarded onto that group for solving, and the response would be passed back to the bot so they could bypass that capture. We actually did a little bit of work for a capture farm to understand exactly how they worked. It's pretty unrewarding financially and kind of motivationally. It's not great. But what we're seeing now, because obviously it's more expensive to do this with humans, we are seeing AI-driven capture farms. And one of the takeaways from understanding the background around these AI capture farms is AI is actually better at solving capture than humans. It's certainly faster. And essentially the as a service, so capture farm or capture solve as a service, isn't going away. There are pretty much capture farms out there for every capture type. So yeah, bots can pass capture, and again, we use capture as a single as a single tell. We don't rely on capture to prevent bot attacks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and finally, just quickly, I did mention that it's possible to go on the deep dark web and pretty much buy a bypass of some kind off the shelf. Can you give us any more insight into what we're seeing in terms of like bypasses, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. So the bot market is so sophisticated that you're quite often buying a bot in itself, and then you're buying the infrastructure like the residential proxies, and the bot will come with a bypass. So essentially what's happening is the bot is calling into an API at the point of making a request to the website, and then it is able to bypass whatever the protection is for that website. And it's really standard functionality. And again, because we don't use just one signal, we don't just use capture, we don't just look at source, we're able to layer on defenses for our customers. So there are no bypasses out there for Netacea at the moment.
That's true. I think for most solutions on the market, it's fairly easy. You can start with a Google search looking for these bypasses, and then you very quickly end up on some fairly dark forums where you're then directed, typically, I think, like off onto different other channels of communication like Signal and Telegram and all of those things, Discord, where you can find effectively online shops to buy all of this stuff from. So just quickly, I'm going to talk through the generations of bot management, because I think it's clear now that the bot attacks we're seeing are becoming increasingly sophisticated. And in Netacea's worldview, we believe we've seen, or we are at the third generation of bot management at the moment, and the fourth one is coming up on us very quickly. So the first generation was those static checks that were rules-based, and they really looked for existing known bad sources. Then we moved on to the second generation of bot management, which was the agent-based approach, where you have a client, you deploy an agent. That method is focused on validating the device, looking at the behavior and saying, do we think that this is a real device used by a real human? Is this behaving like a real human? One of the main challenges with this kind of client-based approach or an agent-based approach is that it's often executed by squirting a bit of JavaScript into the client. That's then visible to the adversaries. And even if it's obfuscated, you can deobfuscate it. You can understand what questions the check is asking, and then you can just program the responses that are expected. So it kind of gives you the expected answers, and all you have to do is program them in, and then you can get around that kind of approach. At the moment, we're on the server-side model, and you'll see many of the other anti-bot solutions in the space are now moving from having just a client-side approach to having both a client-side and a server-side approach. And that's because they're making this transition to the server side as well. But it's not something that can be done overnight, so they need to kind of bridge that gap. Whereas the Netacea approach is very much focused on the server side and analyzing that interaction between the visitor and the server. And that means that we can be more responsive in real time and deal with those dynamic attacks. It also means that we can use some of that information in a predictive way. This is the intent-based stuff. We're like working out where the attack is going to move next and being able to understand when a visitor is going to change their behavior and stop pretending to be a human and reveal themselves as a bot. And probably, and another thing that's well worth mentioning is that because there is no client or agent here, it's completely invisible to your attackers, your adversaries. They don't know what is stopping them. And then again, this little green box here, the future, self-learning, fully autonomous, dynamically evolving. That is, now that there's this big AI evolution happening, it may be possible, I don't know, whether we'll see completely autonomous AI-driven bots today. As I said, today bots still require this human intervention, but maybe in the future that will change. Andy, I don't know if you have any thoughts. I know that one of your sort of pet subjects at the moment is agentic AI and the fact that we're going to see lots more machine-to-machine traffic on the web.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the type of bot attacks we have today, there is absolutely the possibility of using agentic or any AI in general to finesse an attack as it's happening, to understand why the attack is being prevented from being exploiting the website, and to retune that in real time. And that's we haven't seen that yet today, but I do expect to see that in the not too distant future. Fully autonomous, well, there has to be some intent behind the attack, right? So somebody has to be trying to steal something. So fully autonomous, maybe. I think if we think about combining agents that do scraping for high value goods and then start an attack without any human intervention, but somebody needs to set that in motion. We're not quite talking about machine on machine yet. What is quite interesting is that a lot of the internet is going to be machine to machine traffic. So if you think about the stages of bot management we've gone through, detecting human versus bot, and then we've started to think about human versus good bot versus bad bot. Agentic AI is essentially removing the human from the internet, and therefore all communication or lots more communication will be between machine, the agent, and probably the agent on the endpoint. And that presents a challenge. And again, Netacea, because we look at intent of traffic, not whether it's human or whether it's bot, we just say whether it's good or bad, what's malicious and what isn't. We're well set up to deal with that. And that is coming quite quickly. I mean, that was a key topic in RSA this year. In fact, the marketing is behind the talk in the show, which is unusual. But that will be different next year. I think the whole world will be talking about agentic AI and what it means to web traffic.
Great. Yeah, I would love to do a debrief on all of the news on the ground from RSA and all of the conversation about agentic, but unfortunately we don't have time for that today. Maybe in a future episode. If I'm right, around now one of my colleagues should be doing some technical wizardry to make a button appear on your screen. Now, if you want to give us 30 days worth of your traffic logs, we will be able to analyze them for you in much the same way we did in those examples where I showed you the charts, and we'll be able to tell you, help you identify where we think there were attacks and what we would have been able to do by way of mitigation. If you click that button, then that will start a process where we will engage with you to see if we can make that happen. It's no commitment. That's just something we would like to be able to do if you're interested. If you're watching this webinar on demand, so not the live version, and you are still interested in the offer, then there will be some instruction in the emails you get when you're watching this that will also help you participate in that offer as well. So I'm just going to close out now and give Andy a little bit more time here. But I think everything that we've gone through today kind of shows you that bots and automated attacks exist in a lot of different areas, and there's a lot of different vectors for attack here, and that's why you need bot management on your risk register. So Andy, in your capacity as a CISO, can you give us a sort of closing word on that?
Yeah, so I mean, automated attacks exist right across the risk register. I was recently at I was presenting at a conference, and I asked the audience, put your hands up if you have a risk register, and of course most of the conference put their hands up. Keep your hands up if business logic attacks are part of that risk register, and only 1 or 2 hands remained. And that's not surprising, because it's not a traditional area that you would consider for risk. But when you look at what the effects of bot attacks are, the two that are easy to talk through now are, financial loss. Well, there is financial loss attached to any attack, whether that is just that you're using more infrastructure and it's costing you more money to service this payload of bot traffic, but also if you think about the cost of fraud in and of itself, so any kind of refunds, but also the investigation. The dwell time of bots is quite long if you're not joined up between the fraud and the cyber teams, and mitigating obviously costs money as well. And the other risk category that sticks out is the reputational damage, where there is a slow effect of bot attacks on the reputation of a brand. If you think about a traditional security attack, you may be in the newspapers if you've had a ransomware. There've been quite a few recently. That's an immediate impact, but bot attacks tend to kind of eat away at brand reputation through basically inconveniencing customers, and that could be around loyalty points being stolen, or just not being able to log into your account one day. People get very frustrated with that, and it eats away at the reputation of a brand. So yeah, I mean, they appear in all of the bot attacks appear in all of these risk categories, and the financial loss is probably as much as a ransomware attack, if not more, over the course of time. So I would encourage everyone to move bot attacks into their risk register.
Thanks very much, Andy. So we are at the end now. Hopefully that was interesting for everybody. Thanks again, Andy, for joining me today. Really good to get an actual CISO insight. As I said, this is part of a series. So if you found this aspect, looking at the digital attacks, quite interesting, then you might find the previous episode of this webinar, where we look at more of the refund and the post-payment kind of attacks interesting. We do also have our Cyber Fraud in Retail 2025 report that has just come out. That is a really deep look into sort of like the gritty underworld of cyber fraudsters and how we're seeing the increasing presence of these like hardened criminal gangs from Russia, as well as quite interesting, a growing acceptance of casual fraud among consumers. And this is becoming problematic on two fronts for retailers, right? We also have some statistics on the volume and value of things like stolen gift cards that have been available over the last 12 months, and some analysis of the marketplaces frequented by fraudsters and wannabe fraudsters. So again, that's something I will put into the follow-up email from this. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today.